Satan. You know, it was like I was driving across this bridge and a voice spoke to me, stop the car and jump to your death. You know, if somebody tries to stick something into your shoulder, your arm, that's against your will, I think that's wrong. There's this thing called sin, and there's this other force called Satan that's always causing people to do wrong.
Guys, my name is Jeremy Sladen, and thank you for joining me today on JSlay, Made in the USA. A couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to interview Kerry Pharr. Kerry Pharr has his own platform now called In Your Corner with Kerry Pharr. He's a former professional boxing trainer, worked with some of the best in the world, and has traveled all over the world with that. And now he's involved with global missions. We discuss lighthearted topics such as the difference between being a great athlete versus being a great coach and the different mentalities involved with that. And then we move on to harder hitting topics, culture war stuff, suicide, mental health, depression, and the way out of those pits. So I hope you guys enjoyed this interview today. This man brings a lot of passion, so I'm excited to introduce you guys to Kerry Pharr. Thank you for joining me today on JSlay, Made in the USA. What's up, guys, and welcome to JSlay in the USA. I'm Jeremy, your host, and today I got a very special guest for you. This is Kerry Pharr, former professional boxer. Am I right, Kerry?
Well, I was a professional boxing trainer. I just boxed amateur when I was boxing myself, but over the years, you know, we developed some great talent and had a lot of fun, just like you did in baseball.
Yeah, no doubt about that. You know, that's interesting you bring that up. So when it comes to the best coaches, whether you're talking golf, baseball, now you're saying in boxing, sometimes the best coaches weren't necessarily like the biggest names in the sport coming up. Did you notice that in boxing as well?
Yeah, I've noticed that great fighters generally don't become great trainers. You know, it's usually somebody that wasn't a great, you know, fighter that ends up being a great champion or a great trainer. And I can't explain why, but, you know, what would be your experience with that in baseball?
You know, a lot of times in baseball, it seems like things are happening so fast at the high levels. And to me, at least, those guys that know how to do, well, I'll put it like this. At one time, somebody came up to me and goes, you know what? The best hitters, they were either dumb as or they thought they were the if it's got to be one of the two. So a lot of times they didn't think a whole lot about it. They knew how to pull their mind out of it to just go do. And I think coaches actually have to think through all the parts and pieces and some of the more tediums of maybe boxing. I'm sure there's a lot to it. And I'm guessing the very greatest, it kind of comes more natural, right?
Yeah, you know, like even one of the greatest trainers who worked with Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard, Angelo Dundee, never boxed a day in his life. His brother Chris was a boxing guy, and in the beginning, Angelo was the guy that carried the bucket. But over the years, you know, being in the gym, watching fighters, he learned how to be a great trainer. I can only think of maybe one former great boxer, Buddy McGirt, is the only one I know of that actually ended up becoming, you know, a great trainer. You can't think of, you know, great fighters who actually ended up training boxers. Maybe they made too much money, or maybe they had too much pride, but I think they try to mold everyone like themselves, and maybe that's why it doesn't work.
That's a great point. And also the thing with the money, sometimes the guys that made a bunch of money, got the big name, they want to get out of it and just go live their life.
Yeah.
I know for me, leaving baseball, there was about a 6 year period where I didn't even want to watch. So
yeah, you know, I don't even watch boxing anymore, but I was involved 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and up until about 2000, in the glory years, and, you know, met so many of the great champions and traveled all around the world. But it just, you know, other than a couple of boxers, it just doesn't interest me that much anymore.
You know, coming up as a baseball player and then getting into college and professional baseball, as a Christian, there was a little bit of a conflict at times, especially from outsiders, that, you know, it's like, you know, why do you worry so much about winning? Or, you know, why would you pray about success in your sport? Things like that. But for boxing, it's at a whole nother level. You know, you're going to punch a guy in the face, right?
Yeah.
So for you, was there ever a conflict there, and how did you deal with that?
Well, you know, yeah, people have often asked me, as a Christian, how could you be a boxer, be a boxing coach, and teach people how, to beat somebody up. And with me, the thing was, it's a clean sport, especially the amateur part of boxing. It's regulated. Guys have big gloves on. They have headgear. It's, the intent is to win, but not necessarily to knock a guy out. But if you're a coach or you're a boxer, you're always wanting to stop the other opponent so that you don't leave it in the hands of the judges. But, I felt like it was a clean sport. I saw so many young men that were involved in crime and drugs and stuff like that came into the gym, and boxing gave them a purpose. And boxing is something where you can take a young man who maybe has no self-confidence, but once you teach him how to use his hands and how to defend himself, he becomes very confident. And I think from that standpoint, it's an awesome sport. Where you get into the problems with boxing is when you get into the professional side of it, and there's been where there's money involved, and that's where you have people involved that are doing things that you wouldn't say is kosher, or sometimes even legal, because there are many crooks in every sport, but especially in the sport of boxing.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I think even the Apostle Paul talked a little bit about fighters like fighting for the prize and running the race to win. Am I right or wrong on that?
Paul even said, when I fight, I'm not like somebody that beats the air. He's not like somebody that's shadow boxing. He said, when I compete, I run for the prize. And then he said, the greatest prize is the high calling of Jesus Christ. But, when we compete to win. And you and I were talking off camera earlier about this cancel culture and, how they're trying to feminize, athletics, where they want to give everybody a trophy and nobody wins. And that's crazy. We want to win. There's nothing wrong with winning, and there's nothing wrong with losing. Because it teaches all of us humility. We don't always win. And even the greatest fighters I ever saw, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, every single one of them got beat at some time or another. Larry Holmes was the champion for 7 years. Joe Louis was the champion for 11 years. But at some point in time, everybody loses. And so I think that it's good to face, to be able to win and to be able to lose. Paul said, I've learned in whatever state I'm in, whether it's good or bad, to be content. And so we all need to learn to win, and we all need to learn to lose, but we don't want to lose. But I think it teaches us humility as well.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think sometimes learning to win and living as a winner for a season in your life, that's where the most danger is sometimes. Guys who are on the top, you know what I'm saying?
That's where when somebody, and here's the thing that I saw, Jay, when you have a young man that you turn professional, and he's a good person, but all of a sudden he starts winning, and it's not all because of what he did. It's because of a lot of the things that people did around him. They managed him correctly. They put him in with the right people. But all of a sudden you got a kid, and I had a lot of them that were 15-0, 18-0. They start reading their press clippings, and they start believing what people say about them.
Yeah.
And it really messes up the head. So one of the things that I always told my guys is, remember, don't get the big head, because you're going to meet the same people coming down as you did going up. So always be the same person that you were when you started out. But I saw guys, when they got to a certain level, when they were undefeated, 15-0, 18-0, 20-0, they got the big head, and that's the point where you really have to be careful, because that's the point where a lot of people lose.
One of the things, I love that line you just said about treat people the same and be the same person, as you're going up, is because you're going to come down one day, right? And I know for me, I think I did okay at this, but a lot of guys do not, and a lot of celebrities do not, where they're coming up and they're one person. They still got those values maybe they grew up with, but they hit that level of fame, right? And they begin to, there's a lot of self-aggrandizement, and it's all about them. And you see these changes made in their decisions in their life, the choices they make. And in celebrity culture, I had somebody ask me recently, why is it that all the celebrities are all into this woke culture? And, you got Jim Carrey running around saying we need to make the word communism a good thing. It's like, he didn't grow up that way. You know,
No.
he made all his money on the free market.
But he's been in Hollywood all that time,
That's
too.
right, yeah.
You know, I can remember even as a young guy, I spent a couple of years in California when I was a young man, and California thought a lot differently than the rest of the world. They don't call it the left coast for, without a reason.
Yeah, and you spent a lot of time in Tennessee, right?
I've been in Tennessee since 1976, so yes.
Did you hear recently that
You don't remember 76, do you, brother?
I don't know. Almost there.
Yeah.
You do know that Tennessee is the #1 state that these, I think everywhere in the country is moving into. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that. As long as they don't come down here and bring those liberal values, we want to be conservative, right?
That's right. That's what we're fighting.
And I mean, Georgia, I guess you saw this in the news, just passed a law that people have to show an ID or something to vote, and all of a sudden there's something wrong with that.
Right.
I mean, if I go to the White House to see the president, I got to show an ID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why shouldn't I have to show an ID to vote?
Exactly. And the big contrast is they say that that's bad. That's racist, right? To show an ID to vote, yet they want us to have an ID to show that we have had our vaccine.
Yeah.
That's coming.
Yeah, and they absolutely they want, and I'm just tell you right now, I'm not getting a vaccine, and I'm not getting a vaccine passport because if somebody tries to stick something into your shoulder, your arm, that's against your will, I think that's wrong.
Yeah. And the other day, I wish I would have been quicker on my feet. I sat down with somebody who's more on the side of everybody should be vaccinated. We weren't even there to talk about this, but he's older, and I don't think he's in great health. We sat down together, and he's a friend, but he said, "Have you been vaccinated?" And I said, "No." Are you going to be vaccinated? And I felt like this weird sense of guilt, like, oh, I'm sitting across from this man who could get the virus. But the thing is, he had been vaccinated, right? So
yeah, he was supposedly immunized.
Immunized. And I got thinking about it. It's like, as much as I love him, I'm not responsible for someone else's health. They can make the choice to get the vaccine. It doesn't mean that I have to.
And the thing about this vaccine is it's experimental, and I'm not going to have them put something in my arm that's experimental. And, there's been a big debate about hydroxychloroquine, and I've read where so many people that took hydroxychloroquine got over the virus like almost overnight. And they, once our former president Trump spoke about the benefits of that drug, it seemed like everybody in America started saying, no, you can't take that drug. But
the media, and the trickle down,
And I was in the Dominican Republic, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, 2 drugs that have been shown to, help people overcome COVID, are sold over the counter,
Mm-hmm.
all over the world as a preventative for malaria and things like this, and yet they, the media, as you said, wants to cancel that and have us all get a vaccine that's unproven.
Yeah, there's a contrast I see, and I hate to make everything political, but these days the poles are so far apart. It's very difficult to talk about middle ground. But what I see, and I think as sports guys, we very much understand this. There's this thought of, I'm going to do what's practical to move the ball forward today. Yeah. So hydroxychloroquine would be a preventative thing that it's been around a long time. Mm-hmm. We've got proof of it. So I don't care what the media says. If I can take that, or sunshine, get outside, get some exercise, get in shape, that's going to help your immune system rise.
You're talking about immune system and then doing something to prove. The hydroxychloroquine in Africa is known as the Sunday drug because they take it every Sunday to prevent them from getting malaria. And then I don't know if you've seen, but in Africa, they've had a lower incident than COVID than almost anywhere, and it's because almost everybody over there takes hydroxychloroquine.
But speaking of practical things versus theoretical, and tell me if this rings a bell. So, like, whether it's forest fires in California, well, okay, on one side says we need to spend trillions of dollars to combat climate change because that's what caused it. Whereas Donald Trump walked around and talked to the park rangers like, no. We've got sticks and
clear the
shrubs,
underbrush.
And let's clear the underbrush. That's something we can do today, and that's what the professionals that are walking around saying we need to do.
And they don't do it. And what you're saying, Jay, is that practical, something that works in practice.
Yes.
So if we clean the underbrush, we don't have to worry about the forest fires as much because there's no kindling there to burn.
You got it.
But these people in this, you know, I don't know what they're thinking, but anyway, they say, no, you can't touch the forest. And so we have these horrendous forest fires every year, and we used to manage that type of stuff, and we no longer do that.
Yeah, and part of it is for those, I think I've heard this correctly, and we're getting deep into this topic, but it's the environmental protections themselves that are keeping these forest rangers from actually cleaning up, I believe. So they're shooting themselves in the foot and then wanting to put a massive amount of debt on us as taxpayers to fix something we don't even know if it would work, right? But I mean, look at another issue, whether it's like systemic racism. Here's another, it's a theoretical idea that to the common person in America is relatively new. The traditional Christian conservative thing would be treat the person in front of you, regardless of their color, the same way, with goodness, kindness, respect for their humanity. That's it. Because justice begins and ends with you and how you treat another man. But on the left, it's like, no, there's this thing that we can't really place because the stats may not support it, but there's these structures. Again, it's like a climate change kind of thing. So no matter how much money we give to those causes, the goalposts can always move. They can always shift, right?
Yeah.
And I just think as athletes, it was always about what can we do today that's practical to move the ball forward. I mean, for me, it was the fundamentals. I'm going to go hit on the tee a little bit. I'm going to take some batting practice. I'm going to take some balls in the field. And I'm slowly, over time, going to improve as a player. It wasn't these far out ideas.
Yeah.
That were somehow going to fix the world, you know?
Well, I've got a far out idea.
Lay it on us.
Well, when we're talking about racism, Jesus said that we should love our brother as we love ourselves. And if everybody just loved one another, regardless of skin color, I've had the pleasure of leading African Zulu men to the Lord in Africa. I've had the pleasure of leading, black people in Dominican Republic, in America. And to me, it's not a black or white thing, it's a sin thing.
Yeah.
If I hate my brother, it's because of sin in my heart. And so I have no desire to hate anybody. I want to do like Jesus. Jesus said red, yellow, black, or white, or in that little song we used to sing in Sunday school.
He did pen that, right?
That's right. He said, I think it was AD. Anyway.
The message was true, though.
The message was true.
Yes.
Red, yellow, black, or white, they're all precious in his sight. Yeah, and obviously Jesus didn't write that, but the message is talking about love, and it is. And when I look at a person from another ethnicity or another culture, they're no less valuable in God's eyes than anyone else. I'm no more valuable because I was born in America or born as a white American. Jesus loves, the Eskimo, the African, the person from Asia as much as he does me. And so we need to just look at one another, as equals and love one another. And of course, it's not going to happen because there's this thing called sin, and there's this other force called Satan that's always causing people to do wrong.
Do you think, and I love all that, total agreement. When you talk about sin and Satan and the forces that be, I mean, ultimately as Christians, and I think we're seeing it now more clearly than ever, all of these forces that name themselves different things, a lot of times just wrapped in deceit. It is those evil forces of sin and Satan that is actually the power behind it. Don't you believe?
Yeah, it's hatred. I can remember when I was a kid and my dad left the cotton fields of Alabama and went to Detroit, Michigan to work in the auto factory. And I'm 8 or 9 years of age, and all of the black kids used to chase me home from school every day because I was from Alabama. I didn't hate them, but because I was perceived as this hillbilly. In fact, one of the greatest pains that I experienced as a kid was I can remember passing by a house, and it was a white man that said to me, why don't you hillbillies, I'm 8 or 9 years old, why don't you hillbillies go back where you came from? Mm-hmm. Now, here I am, I'm 8 or 9 years of age, and that's really the reason I got involved in boxing as I got older, because so many people picked on me when I was a kid. And I mean, I just happened to be a white kid from the cotton fields of Alabama, had no malice or hatred in my heart for anybody, but because of where I was from, they didn't like me.
Yeah. And was that boxing, was that actually out of anger? Like, I want to go, beat somebody to a pulp, or was it more like this is a release valve?
No, I don't think it was either. I think when I was growing up, I mean, I'd been, sexually abused when I was 7 or 8 years of age by a man in the neighborhood who took me to a park. When I might have been 6 even. When he got me into a bathroom stall, he sexually assaulted me. Now, that wasn't my fault. Now, I carried that guilt for years, but what it did was it created in me a desire to learn how to fight, because I can remember saying as a very young boy, when I get older, I'm going to learn how to fight and nobody's ever going to hurt me again. The problem was, when I learned how to fight, everybody started carrying guns. So a lot of good that did, right?
Yeah, more innocent times, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speak to that for a minute. That we hear that a lot, and I've been around recovery groups and had therapy myself for my own problems. But when you said you felt guilty,
yeah, and and I've had and I was speaking in a church in Chicago, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago. It was a large church, and the pastor basically had me share my story. And he said, look, I want you to go out in the foyer and I want you to meet people after it was over. And there was a long line of people. And I can remember one lady came up, she was about 70 years of age, and she said, my father and my brother sexually abused me when I was growing up. My father shot my mother. She said, I've been so damaged that I've had 5 husbands. Yeah. And she said, I've just now married to the one that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And so she was going through this pain. And then after she walked away, a man, maybe in his, maybe 60 years of age, was walking up in line. He started crying, I haven't gotten over it. I haven't gotten over it. And he walked up to me and he said, I haven't gotten over it. I was sexually abused as a child and I can't get over it. And friend, I want to tell you that if you've been sexually abused, if somebody's beat you up, if somebody's divorced you, if somebody's hurt you in some way, and you cannot forgive them, you'll never get over it. And then see, there's a story in the Bible about this man that owed a king a tremendous amount of money that he could never pay. In today's money, it would be millions of dollars. And he went before the king and he bowed and he begged the king to forgive him of that amount of money, and the king forgave him. And then he went out and the man owed him a small sum of money, maybe $5 or $10 in today's terms. And he grabbed that man by the throat and threatened to kill him, threatened to put him in a debtor's prison if he didn't pay him. And the king heard about what this man did, and he called him back and he said, look, I forgave you of this multi-million-dollar debt, and you won't forgive this little debt?
Yeah.
And he told the jailers, he said, take this man away and take him to the tormentors. And what they were going to do is they were going to put him in prison to be tormented because he was unwilling to forgive. And I think, Jay, that's a biblical principle. So if you're carrying guilt or shame today because of something that somebody did to you, it wasn't your fault. And sometimes a lot of people say, well, I could never associate with it. Doesn't mean you have to associate with them. Just in your heart, in your mind, say, Lord, I forgive them. And then the Lord, and ask the Lord to forgive you. Ask the Lord to come into your heart and save you. But when you forgive them, it doesn't, I never saw that man again. That man's probably been dead for years. But when I forgave him, it didn't release him. He was still responsible for his sin, for what he did wrong. It released me.
Right. And we can carry those chains. It just feels like a weight, right? It lives in you.
Yeah, and so if you want to get over something, you've got to forgive. Maybe it was your dad, maybe it was somebody that abused you, but you've got to forgive if you want to. That's a biblical principle.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about a lot, Kerry, and a lot of times in my life, the times of greatest growth was either at a rock bottom or something really difficult's happened, or I'm having to work through an issue. And you spoke to that in terms of your childhood and the things it was some tough stuff there. You've walked through grief with your wife passing away, but it's those very things in your life and in my life where I think we've learned the most. We can connect with other people. What are you doing these days in terms of platform, in terms of your mission in life?
Well, let me go back and kind of tell you the lowest point in my life. And we all suffer pain growing up, I think, and learning where we're at, growing into manhood. And, I was a boxing coach for over 20 years, traveled the world, worked in the corner against 4 heavyweight champions, worked against multiple champions, trained champions. But I remember in 1997, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when the doctor called me into the room after he had done surgery and told me that she had breast cancer, it was like somebody had hit me harder than I'd ever been hit in my life. And I couldn't handle it. I fell to my knees. And she fought a good fight, but 4 years later, she died of breast cancer. And it was just exactly 1 month after 9/11 when the Twin Towers had been taken down in New York, exactly the same time in the morning, the same day, a month later.
That had to be so disorienting at that.
Well, I felt alone, and I was just, nothing would comfort me. I went to Florida and was so despondent that I drove across the Skyway Bridge just south of Tampa in St. Petersburg Beach, and I actually contemplated suicide. And the Lord spoke to me and said, your daughter and your granddaughter are still alive, and they need you. And that gave me the strength and the courage to carry on. Well, I was 50 years of age. And since that time, I went to Dallas about a month after that and met a lady several months later and ended up marrying her. And so even after all of this pain, even after all this sorrow, God restored, me and gave me a relationship with another woman. It's never the same, but I've got a great second wife. And since that time, I've written 9 books. I'd never written a book prior to that. I host a Christian television program called In Your Corner that airs around the world. We're involved in missions. We take regular trips to the Dominican Republic and minister to, share the gospel, lead people to Christ down there, do medical missions. And all of this happened after my wife died and after I was already in my 50s. So, my friend, it might be late in life, but it doesn't mean that life is over. God still has a plan and a purpose for your life, just like he does you, young man.
We're trying.
Yeah, amen.
We're trying, yeah.
And so, don't give up. Don't sit around and suck your thumb. The thing that I did, I was hurting, but I got up. I was socially active. I went to church. I read my Bible. I prayed.
But there was a key moment off camera you told me earlier, and this captured me, because I'm very interested these days in the spiritual forces at work. And you said, I drove across this bridge, and it's the second most suicide-laden bridge in the nation.
Yeah.
Right? And you said it was like something just was pulling me down and telling me stop and jump.
It was like a spirit, and I know what that spirit was. It was Satan. It was like I was driving across this bridge, and a voice spoke to me, stop the car and jump to your death. Stop the car and jump to your death. And as I was contemplating that, it was like a soft, gentle voice, and I believe it was the Holy Spirit said, no, your daughter, Christy, and your granddaughter, Cameron, are still alive, and they need you.
Yeah.
So it's a battle.
And one voice was pulling you down, the other voice was pulling you up.
Yeah.
And you say, I didn't quit. I think, to me, it sounds like the key moment was you picked the right voice in a very, very crucial moment.
I love that, because that's right. Don't listen to the wrong voice. Yeah. You listen to the right voice.
Yeah, that old saying they say in addiction recovery. There's two wolves. There's a white wolf and a black wolf, and they both want you. And no,
it's the one that you feed the most.
Yeah. Which one's going to win in the fight? And whoever you feed the most.
Yeah, and I don't like to use that illustration anymore because people don't like for you to use black and white.
The moment I said it, I knew we got to cut that out.
But I mean, we don't have to. But I mean, it's and we're not talking about races of people. We're just talking about one could be red, one could be yellow. The one that you feed is the one that's going to grow stronger, right. And the one that you starve is the one that's going to
die.
Yeah.
Well, we want to kill that bad voice, right?
Yeah, that's right, brother.
one of the biggest messages I think coming from today is, listening to the right voice. And ultimately our goal as Christians is that Great Commission, to spread the gospel to all men, all nations, because ultimately that is the source of that voice. That's that still small voice leading us in the right direction. But culturally we are facing a battle right now. We feel that we've defined the enemy. What would you got any parting words, Kerry, for a message for today's generation of people my age?
Absolutely.
People
absolutely.
in their 30s and 40s.
I've got the same message that you would give people, and that message is don't quit. Most people feel like, that they don't have an impact. Well, I'm not anybody special. Well, I'm not anybody special either. But when I was driving across that bridge and thinking about contemplating suicide, I had a little granddaughter that was about 2 years old at the time, and I was special to her. I was the world to her. So my friend, if you're thinking about quitting, you're thinking about contemplating suicide, you're thinking about giving up, you're thinking about chucking it in, I'm going to say don't quit. You may not be somebody in this world like Jeremy's been, who's played professional baseball, but to somebody, that little girl, that daughter, that son, that mother, that father, you are their world. So don't you dare give up. Don't quit, because that person needs you and that person loves you. And so that would be my parting words. Don't quit, my brother.
That is beautiful, Kerry.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you so much, man. I love it. Yeah.
You too, brother. I'm telling you what, that's a manly handshake. This man got a vice grip there.
Guys, thank you for joining us at JSlay, Made in the USA. So pleased to have our guest on today, Kerry Pharr. We've laughed, we've cried, we shared some helpful life messages. And guys, we want you to go to his website at inyourcorner.com. Is that right?
Inyourcorner.info. Somebody messed up .com and we had to get info.
There we go. Links will be in the description. And look forward to seeing you every day at JSlay, Made in the USA.